Lingling, and this is
Wisconsin.
And we're reporting to you live about the Russian Revolution in World War I. So, at the beginning of World War I, Russia had economic problems. I mean, who doesn't? But they had bad leadership, and that's why. So, anyways, the Bolsheviks, which are a small Marxist group, and they wanted to change Russia throughout the Russian Revolution. So, the population of Russia wanted the technology, but they didn't want the war that they had to go through to get it. And so Russia loaned more soldiers than any other country there was. And Tsar took control of the military, and he made things a lot worse. So, food and supplies weren't found in Russia because of the war, and people were really sad. They were really sad. So anyways, the unhappy citizens marched on the capital, and they had no food, no fuel, and police were sympathetic, but Tsar left the control. He lost it. He lost it all of the nation, so that's pretty sad.
The October Revolution. Lenin became the leader of Russia of communism. Private ownership of land was illegal and gave factories to workers. This is the after revolution. Lenin wanted to end Russia's involvement in World War I. Russia sent representatives to the Central Powers for peace, forced to give up land, and those didn't. Russia almost collapsed after these events. Lenin introduced a new concept, the New Economic Policy. This was a plan that permitted some capitalist activity. Russia started gaining more wealth, and Lenin had few years later died. Now we're going to be talking about the Battle of the Western Front. So, the wars entered on different sides and locations, and they attacked. Little progress was made from these actions. An important event that happened was the Battle of Verdun, and this battle was between France and Germany. Germany meant solely to kill and injure the poor French, just so they can be really weak. Next part is the Armenian Massacre. Russia was going to attack the location of Caucasus, and the Armenians were accused of helping these Russians with their plan. Ottomans went about and tried to conduct genocide toward the Armenians. And genocide is basically the destruction of like a certain group or ethnicity of any kind and trying to wipe them out.
So now we're getting into World War I, and remember that Russia is still in this war. We're introducing new ideas like militarism when the military builds up, and alliances, which we all know what those are. So you have the Triple Alliance, which included Germany, Hungary, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. And then you have the Triple Entente, which included Great Britain, France, and Russia. We're also introducing imperialism, which is like rival empires seeking to keep their power, and nationalism, which is people feeling loyalty and devotion to their country or their culture. So, Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary shot Sarajevo, and everyone knew about it. So, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia for that reason, for them shooting their leader, and
it was considered the shot heard around the world.
Yeah. So, Russia wanted to go to Serbia's aid. They felt on their side, and Germany, they saw Russia as something that was like a threat. So the alliances starting to come in, and everyone started fighting on what we call the
Western Front. More on the Western Front. The Western Front is an area in northern France. It was a location that was deadlocked land that no one won in. These battles were very deadly and many people died, and the conditions were very bad while this was happening. So Now going back to World War One, its battlefield style had new weapons involved, and some of these weapons were trench warfare, and this is where people would hide in trenches and attack. These were very bad and didn't let the people really advance that much. Other inventions that were brought into war was poison gas used to kill the enemies, machine guns to cause more kills, better grenades, and tanks and aircrafts. The tanks were used by the British, and they weren't very reliable at the time. Aircrafts, an example of an aircraft was dogfights, and these kind of aircrafts had machine guns, and they were able to drop bombs from the sky. Total war is a type of war which a society has to use all of its resources. That's what had it come to with World War I. Factories produced more military equipment, and civilians conserved goods since most of them were being sent off for those people fighting in the war. Also, propaganda was introduced, and this was used to inform the people and to convince them to join or just to sway on their side on this kind of topic.
So now we're getting into the United States entering the war. The Germans attacked the U.S., killing their citizens, and so the U.S. still wanted to remain neutral and didn't want to get into any controversy. But the Germans had these things called U-boats, which were German submarines, and so that led to the sinking of the Lusitania, which killed 120 Americans. So now this thing called the Zimmermann Note was introduced, and it was a secret message from the German diplomat Arthur Zimmermann, and he said that Mexico was going to attack the U.S. Remember that Mexico didn't even know about this attack at the time, and so the U.S. had ties with Britain, and in April of 1917, America entered the war.
Discussing the end of the fighting of World War I. Germany was afraid of the U.S. since it had so much power at the time. It lost so many of its troops, and the U.S. sent thousands of troops to the Allies, so they were very powerful and were able to take them down. Germany started to collapse since it would no longer withstand all power coming toward them. Germany sought an armistice, and an armistice is basically a truce that they wanted with the leaders of the Allies. Now, the difficult piece. The U.S. president at the time was Woodrow Wilson, and he had a plan called the 14 Points. In the 14 Points, it basically wanted the reduction of weapons, and people could choose their government. European leaders had lost a lot of land, people, goods, and services. Now introduced was the Treaty of Versailles, and it was basically an agreement between the Allies and Germany. Germany was forced to pay money to the victims of this tragic war, and they accepted. German colonies were given back to other countries. So there was, again, a difficult piece. The Treaty of Versailles also made the League of Nations, and it was basically an organization of the world governments, and were to encourage cooperation and keep peace around the world. Other treaties were also formed to go along with this. The Ottoman Empire broke up into mandates, and these mandates were territories to be ruled by other European powers.
So, as you know, wars don't come free. Here are some of the costs of war. 9 million soldiers died during the war, and the flu epidemic spread into cramped conditions, leaving 50 million people dead. That's more than people that died from the war. U.S. and Japan became stronger countries from the war, and the war destroyed economies. It destroyed factories, and it destroyed cities.
Battle on the Western Front. Wars on the Western Front entered on different fronts or locations of attack. Battle on the Western Front.
Kit!
What? I said
you had to talk to them.
More. Oh, shoot.